I am happy to have Automotive Seminars as a sponsor for the show. Now, if you're not familiar, Automotive Seminars is a diagnostic technician training company. They've got a website that there'll be a link to in the show notes. And what they offer is top-notch training to technicians like us in the field. I've been taking their training courses for years and have got a ton of benefit out of it. They've got top-notch instructors, John Thornton, Scott Shotton, Scott Manna, and every other month they've got a 2-night course that you can sign up for. Join in, ask questions, and afterwards, you've paid for the course, you can access a recorded version whenever you want. You can rewatch the class 2 years later in case you wanted some details on it. And that is a fantastic feature. So make sure to check out the website to see what courses they have available and what's coming up in the future. This podcast is brought to you by Jarhead Diagnostics. Jarhead Diagnostics manufactures in-house diagnostic equipment and storage solutions, as well as distributes for companies like Pico, ATS, and TopDon. One of my favorite tools that I've bought from Brandon and Jarhead Diag is the case for the U-Scope. If you don't have a U-Scope, you probably should, but if you have one, you got to get one of these 3D printed cases, has a magnet on it, has a full-size BNC lead that you can connect to, and it gets rid of the weak point of that scope, which is the mini BNC connection, which is pretty fragile. This case makes this thing nice and secure and makes it an even better tool than it was. So check out jarheaddiag.com. The link is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. We have got Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell as a sponsor for this podcast. Hey guys, if you're looking for programming laptops, you want the laptop set up ready to go for programming control modules on vehicles, you need key cutting equipment, you need diagnostic tools, Isaac is your guy. Has all that stuff available for purchase, and the support that he offers along with the purchase has been outstanding. I bought some stuff from him in the past. I got my Dolphin key cutting tool from him several years back. And again, the support has been phenomenal. Helped me out along the way with anything additional I needed to make it work for me. Also, for the month of June 2023, they've got Autel updates for sale. So make sure to check that out as well. Again, that's autorescuetools.com. The link will be in the show notes. Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping. Thank you for joining us today. We got another good episode for you here. I have a guest joining me once again. His name is Ben Varnadoe. Ben is currently living in Texas, but as you'll find out, he's been all over the U.S. at various locations, different shops. Ben wanted to join me on the show today to tell his story
of being a technician. And this is really start to present. I wouldn't say finish, but present. And he took a very winding road to get to where he is now. And the reason he wanted to share this is maybe for someone who's younger, or maybe someone who doesn't really know what direction they're headed or where they're going to end up in this industry. Ben's story kind of shows that if you stick with it, you keep after it, you stay passionate about what you're doing, things can end up way better than you would ever expect. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I enjoyed this conversation quite a bit. So get ready for a good story. Let's jump in.
Well, I actually just finished up listening to your interview with Cody. And
okay.
I've actually met Cody, so I was like, oh, that's so cool to hear. I ordered one of his first generation Delta Pulse sensors, his second generation Delta Pulse sensors, and actually gave one of my extra ones away to a fellow technician.
Nice. Yeah, those are super handy to have. What you might have told me last week, what kind of scope do you have?
I have the Snap-on Modus. And I also have the U-scope, and I have the Autel 4-channel.
Okay. How's that Autel one work? I've heard good things about it, but I've never actually used one myself.
It's an older one. It works good, but the leads suck on it. So if you're going to get one, I highly suggest investing in good leads.
Gotcha.
The leads, I think the first time I played with it, I was like, how are you going to make sense of anything? Because it was just picking up so much noise. And I ended up getting new leads for it, and it made a difference. It's not a bad scope for $300. But honestly, I grew up on the Snap-on, so I tend to just go back to the Snap-on. It's I don't know, it's second nature to me.
Yeah. Well, if that's what you're used to, I mean, that totally makes sense. I think most of us just gravitate towards what we're familiar with. For me, it's not the Snap-on. I've used the Snap-on one, but only after I got familiar with other scopes. So that's foreign to me to have to. What is it? Snap-on? You zoom in. And then after the capture, you zoom out. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you cut the time base short, and then you zoom. Then you go to the zoom feature, and then you go back in to relook at it. I don't know who the guy was that designed it, but apparently he liked to go around his elbow twice before getting to his shoulder. I mean, it's the best way I can describe it. Yeah, when I explain it to newer users, I'm like, hey, if you're not trying to actually catch the fault and physically watch it at that moment happen, just set the time base for like 50 milliseconds. And then turn right back around, pause it, then zoom. I mean, you can go through and pick out things that way. I mean, even though I'm doing, like, say, relative compression on like a 200 millisecond sweep, I will still run it on a 50 millisecond, hit pause, and then zoom and go back that way, because then I can just kind of move around and see what I want to see. I'm not actually looking for the fault. Very rarely with a scope am I actually, unless it's like an ABS sensor or something like that, very rarely am I actually trying to catch the fault live. So I guess in a way, it would be kind of a good beginner scope, because you just put it on a really quick time base, like a really short time base, and go look back at it later, you know? But
yeah, I think the only times that I really do that is if, I'm tied into a wire and I think there might be like a bad connection. I'll watch it and as I wiggle a harness, or the other thing would be secondary ignition, but even on secondary ignition, so if I'm using the Pico, I almost want to be zoomed in on the event and watch it. Well, so it would be the opposite there.
Well, I like what a lot of guys say with the ATS. They just kind of let it run, and then they go back and look for it. And I'm looking into a new 4-channel scope, and I keep going back and forth between the Pico and the ATS. My only fear with the Pico is sometimes when I start to go down the rabbit hole, I don't notice the stop sign and forgetting to grab an attenuator.
Oh, okay.
That's my fear.
The nice part there is there's less and less direct coils anymore, right? The 2-wire coils. They're out there, but they're becoming less and less. So not that you couldn't ruin the scope if you wanted to, but it's less likely to do it. Yeah, I'm a Pico guy. Okay, so I've never used an ATS.
Okay.
So take that into consideration. But the interface, based on what I've seen from like screenshots and stuff, looks really cumbersome. Like there's a lot going on that you have to understand. And again, it's like whatever you're familiar with and you get used to, it's probably, I'm sure it's a great scope, but for me, I just, like you said, you go to what you're used to.
Yeah.
I like the Pico. I know that. And I'm hesitant to go to Pico 7. I'm on Pico 6 and I've tried 7. I'm like, oh, this is stupid.
I actually have both softwares downloaded, and I keep playing with the demos to see like, okay, which one's second nature. But I will say, to me, the ATS almost feels like driving a Corvette with traction control off. It's more fun, but it feels like, okay, yeah, you're giving me too many options and too much to play with. Like,
okay.
I try and describe things to people. I'm like, okay, you can drive a Corvette with the traction control on, and it's pretty fun. And then you can turn it off and get in trouble, but it's still more fun. But to me, that's almost the way I kind of base the Pico versus the ATS. The Pico to me, the Pico is really nice. I like it. My only drawback is that fear of I'm going to get in a hurry and forget to grab that attenuator. But I'm actually glad you bring that point up, because I hadn't thought about that. That yes, we are actually seeing less of the 2-wire coils. The only thing I have to worry about is a fuel injector doing a kickback. But even then, not so much.
I honestly have done plenty of just regular, like the multi-port, 12-volt injectors, not the GDI stuff, but I've done plenty of those with no attenuator on it. And I have the 4425. It's the one before the newest one,
the no battery kit.
Right. Yeah, I have a box of 9-volt batteries in my bag. And that thing's pretty durable for injectors. At least my experience. I'm not recommending anybody go fry their Pico, but
well, I tell you, the number one test I do with my scope all the time is actually starting and charging systems test. I remember one of the instructors made the comment that the battery is the foundation to all diagnostics, because without electricity, without a good foundation, you really shouldn't go much farther without taking care of that problem first. And it's also a great test with younger guys to get them comfortable with a scope. And even with the 2-channel modus, I'm pointing out to them that I'm doing a battery test, a starter test, and an AC ripple alternator test, all in one shot with 2 leads, period. End of story.
Sure.
And actually, the one I've diagnosed the most, I'd say, charging systems on, it doesn't ever happen in the first 5 minutes. It's usually all the loads, the rear defrogger, the seat heaters, and all that on, and after 5 minutes. If it's going to fail, that's when it's going to fail. And
sure.
Before I got to Colorado, I'd never thought about running a test like that. And because growing up in Georgia, it's like, okay, rear defroster, seat heaters. What are seat heaters? And but to actually think about, okay, people drive for 30 minutes, an hour with these loads on. And so I've actually got to the point where a lot of my starting and charging systems tests, they're easily 10 minutes. Unless something just jumps out like a bad battery immediately. But my alternator test used to take 10, 15 minutes minimum to start out with. And
yeah, you got to stress that thing
yeah,
under the circumstances that it normally would be. And
right.
I know a lot of us, including myself, forget that sometimes. Like, it's not always just a static issue. You gotta you gotta go drive that thing.
Well, and
do what the customer does.
I remember some of my former employers I worked for were old school guys, and they used to talk to me about full fielding alternators. And
sure,
yeah, good luck on full fielding an alternator nowadays. So what's the best way to stress it? Turn every load on possible. And you know what? Your customer will never put more loads on it than you can put on it. So that's just kind of the way I look at it.
I remember going through tech school, and I think it might have been a Ford. It's a long time ago, but there was an alternator. You could take a screwdriver, go in through like a hole in the back of the alternator, and you ground out the terminal, I think, to the body of the alternator. There's some pin in there, and it would full field the alternator.
Oh,
that's how you did it. Because I remember hearing that, and then I don't know that I ever did it out in the field because they were all computer controlled by the time I got out there. So
yeah, and it's kind of interesting too because I remember sitting in a CTI class and the instructor telling us when testing a Volkswagen Jetta alternator, do not get it above 2,500 RPMs because it self-excites. And I'm going, a 1.8 liter turbocharged Volkswagen Jetta, do not get it above 2,500 RPMs? Okay, what you're telling me is push it then. So, yeah, it was pretty interesting. And over the years, I've learned some pretty cool things, but that's one of the things I like to teach to younger guys. You know, hey, if you're just wanting to get used to and getting comfortable with the scope, man, start with a starting and charging systems test. You're not going to hurt anything. It just kind of gets you comfortable. You're not necessarily, as Brandon says, picking the fly poop out the pepper. You're just looking at the numbers. And so it's a good thing.
The scopes are a great thing for people that are starting out with this because it's a visual representation of what's going on, right? We can't see electrons and voltage and current resistance. We have to imagine it, but that gives us a graph. It gives us a picture. And for me anyways, that visual really helps me understand, or at least attempt to understand what's going on in that circuit. So, yeah, for something as simple as a charging test or starting or whatever, it's great stuff. We use them at the school for that reason, right? And I tell them, you may not use a scope every day. You might not. I think you should, but you might not. This will still help you understand what we're doing. Well,
there was a wonderful Snap-on instructor about 5 years ago that put on a scope class, and he one of the comments he made in the class was return on investment of tools. And the question he posed to everybody in the class was, what is your most used tool? And of course, guys kind of wanted to be the smart guy in the class and say their brain. And he's like, no, I want a physical tool. And one of my responses was my pocket screwdriver. And he was like, okay, pocket screwdriver. And then one of the guys mentioned a flashlight. And it kept going and on. And basically, he said, so those of you that bought $5,000 and $10,000 scope scanners with scopes, how much do y'all use them? And most people, I think we kind of figured up it was like 10% out of a day. And he said, so let me get this straight. You bought a $10,000 tool and you use it 10% of the day, but yet you have a $200 flashlight and you use it 70% of the day. Tell me what is wrong with this return on investment. And the point behind it is figure out how to use your scanner more so that you get a good return on investment. And honestly, I mean, I have a Fluke. I still use it, but
yeah,
a lot of times I go for that Modus, and I can use it as a meter. I can use it as a scope. And once I started thinking about that, people started making a comment. They're like, every time we see you with a scope. I'm like, pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, I spent $5,000, $6,000 on that Snap-on Modus Ultra. You better believe I'm going to get my money out of it. So,
yeah. the U-scope is the one that I grab all the time, right? And it's a little different for me because if I'm doing the mobile stuff, I don't have a cart that I can put the Pico on. So it's a little bit of work for me to pull it out. And certain things, it's necessary. If I'm doing a cam crank or I really need some detail, it's a Pico all day long. But 90% of my scope stuff is that U-scope. I use that in place of my voltmeter and for so many things that I do. So, I mean, that's one tool that I've said it plenty of times before. Maybe people are tired of hearing it, but everyone should own one for $160.
I bought the U-scope master kit, and I've got it. I guess kind of like we were discussing it, whatever feels comfortable for you. So I can grab that snap-on scope and just go. And with it being a touch screen, it just gets me through there so quickly. I need to play with my U-scope more. I really do. I mean, it fits perfectly in your pocket, but it seems like if I need to grab the scope, I grab that snap-on, I go for it. Now, I am not a product placement nor endorsing Snap-on, but it works for me. It's the comfortable tennis shoe theory.
Well, hey, on that note, going with what you were saying there, you had a story to tell everybody that you wanted to share. You reached out to me, and I think it's definitely worth telling. Before we get into it, though, I'm just curious, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. Why did you want to share your story, or maybe who are you intending this to benefit?
Well, now that I've turned 40 years old, I'm looking back at my career to see how can I help the younger guys coming up. We keep talking about how there's a shortage of technicians in the industry, and I've seen where shops have just not necessarily nurtured technicians. And my story is a very twisted route to get to where I am. Am I the best in the industry? Absolutely not. I can give you at least 10 names I see on YouTube that I'm not sure if I can make a ham sandwich for them. But I have been very successful in my career. I'm happy at where I'm at in my career. And hopefully my mindset that I can give to them will maybe motivate them to stick with it, stick with the road, and keep going in their career. As we discussed already, I mean, I took a very roundabout method, probably the last predicted person to go into the automotive mechanical trade. But I don't regret it, not one bit. If my 6-year-old son said, "Dad, I want to follow in your footsteps," I know 100 technicians that would say, "I would never tell my son to follow me." I'm not one of those. I would tell my son. I would show my son this is what I've done. How can you be better than me? And that's what I'd like for these technicians to be. I'd love to see. My favorite thing I see in life is when I see a 28-year-old technician that's better than me. I love it. It's my favorite thing, and I like to nurture and see younger technicians come up. I don't know what kind of legacy I'll leave when all this is said and done, but if I can pass on what I know to one technician, then I've done my job. If I can pass it on to 10, then I've done my job 10 times over. And if I can motivate 100 technicians, then I've done my job 100 times over. So that's my thought behind it, and that's why I would like to tell my story of how I came up in the industry. It was actually a funny part. We had a technician have an accident the other day at work, and he damaged a car. And the very first thing I did was I went to him and I told him, "Look, I've made plenty of mistakes in my career. I've tore up things. Don't let this stop you. Don't, let it go. The boss isn't mad.
Yeah.
Just learning lesson and move on." So that's kind of what I would like my story to do to some of the younger technicians is let my life be a learning lesson and listen and take it and motivate you with it.
Well, Where do we start?
Okay, well, let's start at the ground. I was born in 1980. No, I'm just kidding. We won't start that far back. I actually started working in an auto repair shop in November of 1996, 1 month after I turned 16. I was the full-service gas pump boy. The little bell would go off, and I would go running out there and pump the old lady's gas, check her tire pressures, make sure fluids were full. About 1998, while I was still in high school, which was a very well-to-do private school in Savannah, Georgia, we had the OSHA and the EPA come out and tell us we needed to update our gas tanks. And at that point, my employer said, I'm not going to update them. It's too much money. So I had to learn something. And they started showing me flat repairs and oil changes. So that kept me working. And it was a good thing. I enjoyed working around the older guys. It was fun. Working on cars was cool at the time. Looking back on that now. But so that's what I was doing through high school. Now, the high school I went to, the rule of thumb was you graduated high school, you went to college, you got a degree, you got married, you had kids, and then you died. That was how life worked. Most of the people I graduated with went on to be doctors and lawyers and very well-known professions. I graduated towards the bottom of my class. I was in the bottom 10% of my class. I barely passed high school. I just didn't enjoy school. But I kept working in my auto repair shop, and it was fun. It was cool. I got to fix tires. And so I followed the pathway and went to college. And both my parents were RNs. They were nurses. And one of the things that fascinated me was meeting some anesthesiologists. They're doctors. They put people to sleep during surgery. And it was kind of neat. During high school, I got to go for 1 week in the operating rooms and observe what they do. And It was fascinating, getting to see them put somebody to sleep while they removed a cancerous prostate two surgeons did remove a cancerous prostate. I mean, that to me was the coolest thing in the world to see. It kind of reminded me of somebody working on a car, but it was a human being. But it was neat. That's what I wanted to do. And I'm working in the shop after hours, after school's out, and things are going good. I'm doing okay. And I graduate towards the end of my bottom of my class, and I go to college. Well, one of the things my parents told me was go get your nursing degree. That way, if you don't get in med school on the first try, you've at least got a career to fall back on.
Okay.
So I start going to nursing school while I'm still working in the auto repair shop. And I got to the point where we started doing clinicals. And when it came to start sticking people with needles, I realized really quickly I had a phobia of needles.
Oh, no.
I'll never forget the first live person I went to draw blood on was a very nice old man. And I immediately started pouring sweat and shaking, and I missed it on the first try. I missed it on the second try. And once you miss on the second try, you're done. They move you out of the way and somebody else comes in. And
yeah,
I just remember him telling me in such a nice way going, don't worry, you'll get better one day. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm done. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm not doing it. I can't do this. I mean, that's the basics of doing your job, and I can't do it. So yeah. I gave up on college. I was done. And my boss that I worked for, super nice guy, still worked at the same little 3-bay repair shop that was built in the 1950s. Everybody knew everybody. So I just went back to work for him. And he took me on full time, and I was probably the smartest, or I should say the dumbest smart kid there ever was. I was the mouthiest 20-year-old there ever was. Everybody in the shop was old. I didn't need to listen to them. You're not going to teach me nothing. I know everything. And come to find out, looking back in life, I really didn't know nothing. But that was my attitude. I actually left there, went and worked in a bicycle shop for a little while.
Okay.
I did go off to Oregon to a bicycle school to learn how to run a bicycle shop.
Wow.
I learned a lot about building racing mountain bikes because I enjoyed cycling at the time. I was racing mountain bikes and things like that. And I learned real quickly that working in a business that is a hobby, the only people that really make money in that are the people that own the business. And
okay,
I didn't see myself going in that route. So I went back to my old shop. As I always say, the comfortable tennis shoes analogy. It just fits. And I worked there until about 2003 or 2004. And
okay,
I mean, he was paying me cash under the table on Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, I was broke because I had been in the bar all night. It was a never ending cycle. And,
yeah,
I was great at partying. I'd never lost a party in my life. I could tell you what drink specials were any night of the week and where to go, but I wasn't getting anywhere. And I remember I went to him, and I was dating a girl at the time, and I asked him for a raise. And I actually spoke with him the other day to tell him about this story. And his comment to me was, I offered you the raise if you came in on time. And I said, well, I remember you telling me you weren't going to put any effort into me. And I said, I don't blame you. I look back in life and I don't blame you at all for not putting any effort into me. I was a mouthy 20-year-old that knew nothing but knew everything. And I couldn't get to work on time. I don't blame him not wanting to give me a raise. And I ended up...
He didn't want to invest anything.
No, and I don't blame him. I mean, really, if I was an employer, and I've told him this to his face, I said, if I was my employer, I would have fired me 5 times at least. But the one nice thing I will say about him was he was patient with me. And that's the first job. The first mechanical job I had there was the one I told you I messed up. I was doing a headlight on a mid-80s truck, and he told me, hey, it's just 3 screws, and I pulled out the 3 adjuster screws. I learned how to aim headlights.
Yeah.
But he was a very patient guy, and I understood that, and I can say I probably took advantage of the situation. I shouldn't have. But I ended up leaving, and I went to a large company in Savannah that they had 10 shops at the time. And each one of these shops was probably about 10 bays at the time. So very large shop, what I call a local chain.
And how old are you at this point?
I was 25 years old.
Okay. Are you still living with your parents?
I was bouncing back and forth between living with roommates and going back to my parents and things like that.
Okay. I'm just curious, what was their attitude, or did they voice their opinion at all? Because I know you said they were nurses, and then you shifted away from that. How did they feel about that?
Disappointment.
Okay.
Disappointment, because they saw that I had apathy and empathy towards people, and they were like, you would have made a great doctor or a great nurse. And they were kind of they were also looking at the fact that we spent that much money on college and tuition, and you just kind of threw it away. So they were very disappointed.
Okay.
And they were kind of I have 2 older brothers, and with me being the youngest, it was kind of like I'm their last hope. It didn't work. That's the best way to describe it. It didn't work. So I got hired. I went for an interview at this company, and the first thing I had to do was be able to pass a drug test. So, okay, so we got to take some weeks off so we can pass a drug test. And I'll never forget, I sat down and interviewed with a guy. I'll just call him DW. When he hears the podcast, he'll know who he is. He was a store manager at the time, and he asked me, I was going to go in for like an entry-level tech job. And he said, no, we just want to hire you as a general service tech. And I said, okay, well, hey, I'll start at the bottom and work my way to the top. And he asked me, he said, what's your goal in life? And it kind of caught me off guard that he said that. And he asked me again, he said, what's your goal in life? And I said, well, my goal in life is if I can make $40,000 a year, and I can have a double wide trailer and be able to afford a used car, I'll have made it. I mean, I'll have made it. And he laughed at me in my face. And, I kind of sat back in the chair like, why is this guy laughing at me? And he made the comment. He said, my lowest earning technician in this shop made $65,000 last year. My highest earning tech in this shop made $100,000 last year. And at that point, I realized I had set my bar too low. And I was now about to be working for career money, not beer money. So I got hired on as a general service tech, and they ran the dog mess out of me. The first day on our speed lane, we did over 40 oil changes. So I was going through as a general service tech, and for some reason they saw something in me, and they sent me to what they called their general service level 2 school, which was basically learning how to do flushes and belts and hoses. And then they sent me into an apprenticeship under the $100,000 a year technician. And all he did was alignments, brakes, and some very light duty work and suspension work. And that's all he did, because it was mostly a tire shop. And I started to work under him, and he took a liking to me and recommended that they send me to Hunter Alignment School in Atlanta, Georgia. So I got to go to Hunter Alignment School, and the little bit of that young, wild 20-year-old came back, because when I got back, I kind of rubbed it in his face that I had Hunter certificate and you don't. And he humbled me really quickly on that first alignment to teach me that experience outweighs any piece of paper ever. But he took a liking to me, and when we weren't busy, the thing he made me start doing was they provided us with the ASE study guides, and he made me sit down and start reading them, doing the practice test. He would score the practice test, and we would go over whatever questions I got wrong. So he put a lot of effort into me. And about that time, that girl I was dating, we got married, and then we got divorced. And I kind of went into a little bit of a tailspin, but my mentor kind of tried to keep me on the right path. I ended up getting 2 ASE certifications during that time. So the company moved me up into a technician position, flat rate. Congratulations. It's time to play with the big boys. They then transferred me to another location, and it just did not work out. I got underneath my mentor's wing, and, kind of like the little bird, they push him out the nest, and it didn't work out very well. So I ended up leaving that company and going back to my original shop that I started out in. And that was probably around 2007. I went back to that shop because I had something to prove. I didn't leave that first shop on bad terms, but the man I was going back was a lot different than the man I was when I left. And I had something to prove. And I'll never forget that same guy. I'll call him Tommy. He'll know who he is.
Okay.
He, as soon as he saw my toolboxes unloaded, he made the comment. He said, I can tell you're a different person because I can see it in your toolboxes. You're organized. You have your stuff together. I started showing up to work on time. I forgot who said it on one of the podcasts, just somebody that can show up and find their way to work. I started being that guy. I could find my way to work. Okay. And I went back and I worked with him for a while, and I met my current wife. She was active duty in the Army. She was an officer in the Army. When I met her, she was a captain in the Army. And she was active duty. And we had been dating for about a year. And I had been back at my old shop about 3 years. I'd bought a house, so I'd already passed my first goal. I owned a house, an actual brick and mortar house, not one, nice, not a double wide. I met my wife, and we dated for about a year in Savannah, Georgia. And it came time for her reassignment, and they were moving her to Denver, Colorado. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, what do you want to do? And it kind of went back to my days of when I first started in that shop. I better figure out something to do or start all over again. And this time the start all over was go to Denver, Colorado with her. Yeah. I'd never moved out of the state of Georgia. I packed up everything I owned. I packed up my toolboxes in a U-Haul trailer and moved halfway across the country to Denver, Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah. Whew, crazy. Yeah. Before I moved to Colorado, I'd already been conversating with an employer out there. I found an employer that was hiring in Aurora, Colorado, and he was a Napa Auto Care facility. I saw his website it was a generic Napa Auto Care website that said they do tires, they do alignment, they do everything basically. Is what the website says. And I was just a brake and suspension guy with a little bit of air conditioning experience, and I walked into that shop and come to find out they were a transmission shop. Oh. Yeah. They didn't have an alignment machine. They didn't have a tire machine. I was a fish out of water. Come to find out, what they did was they rebuilt transmissions, drivetrains, and heavy diagnostics. And yeah, so I was way out of my league. I worked there for about 3 weeks flat rate. And I went to the owner and said, I'm starving. I can't survive.
Yeah.
And me and him, we sat down, and he said, how much do you need to pay your bills? And I said, I need at least $550 a week to pay my bills. And he goes, how about this? I'll give you $600 a week. You do anything and everything I ask you to do, and I guarantee you will have one of the best educations you've ever gotten. And I asked him why he was doing it, and he told me when he was in his 20s, he grew up in San Francisco, California, and he packed up everything he had and moved to Denver, Colorado to go to school. I forgot the name of the school now, but he went to school out there to learn how to build transmissions. And that was how he got his start. So his story and my story were very, very similar. And I think that's why he took a liking to me. And he's told me since then, he goes, I saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. I always think back to that to this day, because it seems like that's the theme is people keep seeing something in me I don't see in myself. And I guess there's something out there. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's huge to have somebody like that.
Yeah, my mentor said the same thing. DW said the same thing. Apparently they saw something I didn't see. So he put in a lot of effort into me. And on a side note, my first Christmas I spent in Denver, I was going to spend it alone because my wife had to go home for a family emergency. And he was like, there's no way in hell you're spending Christmas by yourself. You're coming to my house. And I went to his house and spent Christmas with his family. So they very much not only not only supported me professionally, but they supported me personally too at the same time. Okay. And yes, they put in, those guys that I worked with there, they put in a lot of effort into teaching me things. That was the first time I'd seen an oscilloscope outside of a magazine, was working with those guys. This would have been 2009, 2010. They were doing pressure transducers in the combustion chamber.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah, that's early.
Yeah, it was early on. I had never heard of it, and it was amazing. They sent me to CTI classes. The first CTI class I ever went to, the instructor was Todd Doty. It was an electrical class, which I was horrible at, was electrical. And out of 8 hours, 2 nights for 4 hours each, the only thing I learned in that class was, if you don't like the reading that you're getting on your meter, move your ground. Out of 8 hours of an electrical class, that was all I learned. Because the rest of it was like the deep end of a swimming pool. It was over my head. So yeah, that's what I learned.
Well, I mean, it's good advice, right?
It's great advice. I still use it to this day. Those guys put so much effort into me and teaching me things. Between working on cars, cleaning the bathroom, sweeping the floor, taking out the trash, those guys put so much effort into me that when eventually I started picking up 80% of what they were teaching in the CTI class. And the great thing about those guys was, anything I didn't understand in the CTI class, I could go back and ask the guys I worked with, and they would sit down and explain it to me to a point where I could understand it. They broke out the oscilloscope. I got to learn about that. I got to learn pintle humps on a fuel injector. I got humbled by a few diagnostics, learning how to amp ramp fuel pumps, things like that. I still remember that one on that Blazer. Came back 3 times on the hook.
That's so cool, though, to be able to work with people like that, that are older or more experienced, combination of both than you. I honestly, in a shop setting, I never got to experience that. And not to say anything about myself, all the older techs that I worked with at any shop, and some were definitely better than others, but they were that traditional flat rate guy. Let's bang these parts out, and you're lucky if you see them with a scan tool and a meter ever, right? So I'm kind of jealous of that experience, to have a working relationship with somebody who's into that stuff, that wants to get into the diagnostic side of it.
Well, the first tip I give a lot of younger guys is the first tip I give them, if you want an older technician to actually teach you something, the very first thing you need to do is be quiet. The only noise you need to make is when you're asking questions. That was my first problem in my early 20s, was I talked and didn't listen. And the best thing that happened to me in my mid to late 20s was I stopped talking and I listened. The gentleman I apprenticed under, I used to go get his lunch. And people were like, why'd you go pick up his lunch? The reason I picked up his lunch was he was teaching me attention to detail. Don't mess up my lunch order. Yeah, it's a lesson I learned. I didn't think about I was learning at the time, but he's right. You pay attention to details. The shop in Denver, I walked in there as a suspension and brake guy. I could do any job I needed to do in 8 bolts. 8 bolts. That's all I needed. Just 8 bolts. Anything more than 8, I've taken off 1 or 3 too many. It was amazing to me to see a guy take a transmission out of a car, take all the bolts that he used, throw them in the parts washer, and then disassemble a transmission and throw all those pieces in a parts washer and pull it all out and still be able to put it back together. It amazed me. I was shocked. I didn't know how it happened. It was magic in my eyes.
Yep.
And what was the best lesson I actually learned was from that transmission builder. He would take every bolt that he used and run it through the parts washer. It came out clean. He would lay a rag out on his cart and lay every bolt matching up. And I asked him one day, I said, how do you know where those go? And he held up a bolt in his hand and he said, there was a guy with an 8-year degree in engineering that designed this bolt to go in that hole. And that's how I know where that bolt goes. And that bolt only goes in that hole. And the lesson I learned out of that was actually looking at the design, the length, the shape, the style of the bolt, and knowing what its function was.
Sure. I
had never thought about that. I mean, a bolt was a bolt. Every bolt's a bolt. If it's too long, put a couple washers on it. Send it.
Yep.
But those guys, I mean, that's how meticulous they were to detail. We had a hot seat. We hot seat. If it had a fluid leak, it got hot seed from front to back. I never understood the reasoning behind it. After I left, I understood that if there ever was a spot of fluid on the ground, you'd know exactly where it came from.
Sure.
And so they were, if you walked in the shop, you wouldn't think it was meticulous for detail, but oh my Lord, those guys were meticulous for detail. And that was a good lesson I learned from them. And, but as it goes, when being married to the military, 2 years, it's time to move again.
Okay.
And this time, my wife got selected to go to grad school in downtown Chicago. And anybody that's familiar with Chicago will know she basically lived at the corner of Little Italy and the Hospital District. Taylor and Ashland Street, which is, you can't get more downtown than that part of Chicago. Me being a boy from the country, it was a concrete jungle. I couldn't do downtown Chicago. We went from probably 2,200 square foot worth of house to 750 square foot apartment for the same price.
Oh, wow.
But the one lucky thing is she was only 5 minutes from her family. So I went and lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, while she went to school in Chicago, Illinois. It's only 5 hours. It's not a big deal. She would go to school 3 or 4 days a week and then come stay with me on the weekends. And during the holidays, she'd get to see her parents, her uncles, her aunts, and things like that. But we start all over again. We go into a whole we go into a whole new town. We don't know anybody. We're going out hunting a job. And I found one highway in Mason, Ohio that had probably 20 or 30 auto repair shops. And I just went through there just dropping resumes. I went to the shops that had the best customer reviews to see who had a good customer base. And I went in those shops and just dropped resumes. One shop I'll never forget, before I even pulled out of the parking lot, I watched the lady ball up my resume and throw it in the trash can. I was like, wow, this is going to be fun.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. And luckily,
how old are you at this point?
I was 32 years old. 31, about to turn 32.
Okay.
I walked into a shop and I gave him my resume and he said, hey, I got your resume off of Craigslist already. I was meaning to call you. Do you got time to talk? And I was like, sure, I got time to talk. A little small 3-bay shop like I grew up in Georgia. And he gave me a pretty decent wage. I was making about $700, maybe $750 a week. I had 2 ASEs still. At the time, I just had my brakes and suspension ASE. He was a shop that kind of did everything, but he didn't have a tire machine and didn't have an alignment machine. So I was like, here we go again.
Yeah.
And I had gotten kind of good at air conditioning, so that was going to help me out. And he took me in, and I was the young guy in the shop again, except we did have one younger guy who was about 23 at the time. And we were doing our thing. Now, as a person that grew up in the South, in Savannah, Georgia, we could take off any bolt with a little bit of PB blast and an impact, and it's going to come right off.
Yeah.
I learned all about the flaming wrench very quickly. Very, very quickly. One of the first jobs I got was doing sway bar links on a vehicle, and they saw me grab my impact and a pair of pliers, and they laughed.
Yeah.
They said, call me over in 30 minutes when you don't have it off, and I'll show you how we do this. Now, I was hourly at that shop, so he wasn't so much pressuring us to turn a lot of hours. He was like, hey, we'll make ends meet and things will work out. And it kind of goes back to having a lot of support. That's huge in my career. I've had so much support from people. And that's another reason I wanted to tell my story, was to give them thank you. But
yeah.
So I was working for him. I worked for him. Super amazing guy. I learned all about how to use a torch. I saw
it's a good skill to have, man.
Between two technicians, I saw the big oxyacetylene torches get changed out 3 times in 2 years. The worst part about that job was the 23-year-old. He'll hear the podcast. He'll know who he is. My boss sat down with me one day and asked me, he goes, I think I need to let him go. What is your thought on it? He's loud. He doesn't want to listen. He's not learning. He argued with me and 2 other technicians over a timing belt being half a tooth off. Yeah, it was that bad. And my comment to him was, I think you need to let him go. And he asked me my reasoning for it, and I said, he's just like me. He'll be a better technician if you let him go. He'll learn, he'll go somewhere else, and hopefully he'll learn to be quiet. And that's exactly what happened to him. It's actually one of the greatest joys of my life, is to see how much better than me he has become. So much so, about a year ago, I actually gave him one of my extra Cody sensors, as I like to call them.
Oh, no kidding.
He was doing one of the Brandon Steckler virtual classes, and I told him about the class, and then he got in it. And as I won't say a thank you, but just to kind of pass something on to a younger technician, I had one of those extra Delta pressure sensors, and I gave him an extra one that I had.
Nice.
And
yeah, you just never know. And somebody told me this once I started teaching, my coworkers actually, and he was describing a story of, a younger person. He's like, you never know when these people, technicians or just people in general, are going to blossom or the light bulb will go off, right? And you may be convinced that, oh, this person's hopeless or this isn't for them. And you might be right. Probably majority of the time, maybe you are, but you don't know. It might be a few years down the road and that light bulb goes off and all of a sudden, it's like the person you're describing there. So I try to remind myself, never just disregard someone. They might just need the right, like you said, letting them go in that situation was the best thing for them, but they might just need that right thing or that right support in order to get there. And
the thing with him was, he's very smart. He's very intelligent. He's very analytical. He's very numbers driven. He was a very smart 23-year-old, but the problem was he was too smart at that time. He was too smart to realize he just needed to be quiet and listen, which I saw myself in him. And yeah, he's called me now with some just nightmares. Like, I'm like, man, I'm sorry. He called me one day where he was chasing a short on an ambulance. And I'm like, man, how do you know? Are you pinning into a DC or an AC circuit? Like, and he's actually went on to become very good. He called me about going to work in a Euro shop. He went and worked in a Euro shop, and now he is actually pretty much a diagnostic guy in a body shop. So a lot of times when he calls me, I don't have the service information to give him. I'm giving him what I know off of common sense and maybe pointing him in a direction to get the information, but I don't have it. I mean, so in my book, he's past me. And it makes me happy. I mean, it's one of the few things left in this industry. It makes me smile. Between seeing younger technicians, like helping them along the way and seeing them become better than me, and fixing that problem vehicle that's been to 3 other shops that they couldn't figure it out and I figured it out. Those are my 2 greatest joys left in this industry. So yeah, he's doing great. I'm so proud of him. It's awesome. It just makes me smile anytime I think about him. So he's doing good. But I did my 2 years there, and sure enough, here it goes. It's time to move again. And at this point, me and my wife are expecting our first child. And I called my mentor to kind of give him the good news. And I will say the pep talk he gave me was not the pep talk I was expecting. The pep talk he gave me was, look, you've learned a lot. I now had 6 ASEs at that time. So I've worked my way up. I'm now diagnosing cars. I'm doing electrical. And my mentor's comment to me was, look, you've got a kid on the way. It's time to quit playing around, and it's time to support your family. So all those years that I had of taking less pay but learning, now we need to put them into practice. And I got to Fort Hood, Texas. And Killeen, Texas is a pure military town. I went into an environment where I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any shops. Here we go. We're starting all over again.
Yeah.
I used my same formula. I started looking at shops to see who had the best reviews. And those were the people I went and dropped resumes at. I went to a shop. I worked there for about 6 months maybe. And I just saw nothing but red flags. I saw a technician get hurt, and I tried to take on the job so nobody else would get hurt. And at that point, I realized this is not the place I need to be. So I left that shop. I went and worked at another shop. That was a comedy of a shop. He had 2 racks. We had 2 technicians. I asked him, do you plan on getting any more racks? You've got all this room. And he said, no. So my comment back to him was, well, why am I only making this much money? If I'm going to work on the ground, I could work at home.
Yeah.
You're really, in that point, he really wasn't providing anything to me that I couldn't provide for myself. They weren't providing training. They weren't providing equipment. Literally, the only thing they were providing was a paycheck, and it wasn't much of one either. So I left that shop. And I went to another shop, and it didn't work out at that shop either. And by now, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, before I got to Texas, I had worked at 4 shops in my whole career.
Yeah.
By 2014, I had only worked in 4 shops. 2014, 2016. 2014. I'd only worked in 4 shops. And here I am. I've now jumped through 3 shops in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
I was like, wow, my resume is going to look stellar. And I went to work for another shop, and it did not work out there either. And I took a gamble and started saying, it's only 45 minutes to North Austin, Texas. Why don't I start making the drive? And I got hired on with a shop in North Austin. I don't know if I should mention the names. Don't mention shop names.
It's up to you. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I don't know any shops down there.
I've got no problem mentioning the name. I went to go work for Christian Brothers.
Okay.
Every shop I had left in Killeen, Texas, they had called me a lead tech, which really made me laugh because I had 10 guys on my cell phone that were way smarter than I am. And I walked into Christian Brothers and I was quickly told, you're not the lead tech, which I was okay with that. I got offered more than I was making, so that was a positive. And it didn't take me very long to see the lead tech and realized I didn't know nothing compared to this guy. He diagnosed a lot by common sense. He beat Ohm's law into my head. And it was a very positive thing getting to work with him. I worked for them for about 7 months. I put my 2-month notice in because it was time to move again. And I got let go when I put in about a week after I put my 2-month notice in. But I look back, I got to learn about programming, which I had never done before.
Okay.
I took on a lot more jobs than I had ever taken on before. I got to work with a different clientele, so I got to work with higher end cars than I'd ever worked with because the demographic in that area was a lot higher. I got to go back to working with standard operating procedures, which I work well with those. And I also got to work in a very clean environment, which I thrive in clean environments. I learned that.
It makes more of a difference than some people think, right? I always used to get that from my boss, like, you'll be more proficient in the shops clean. I'm like, okay, whatever. But it's true. It's true. He was right.
It's very true. I personally would start to take more pride in what I worked on. I felt better about people coming to my shop and seeing me because it's kind of like you walking into a dirty house. You kind of look at the house and you're like, wow, did the people just not clean up around here? It makes you kind of wonder. Now, granted, I've seen some very dirty, nasty shops turn out some amazing product. I will not say anything otherwise, but it felt good to work in a clean environment. It felt good to work with standard operating procedures. It worked good for me. We got to go from doing stuff on paper to using tablets. Digital vehicle inspections. I can take pictures of what's wrong with the vehicle. I had a laptop at my toolbox. No more fighting the technician because I need to look up service information. I've got service information. So it was a good, positive thing. But being still married to active duty military, it came time to move again and pack it all up. The only benefit was she was getting reassigned to Fort Stewart, Georgia, which was back in my hometown of Savannah. And we were getting to go home again. And first person I called was my good old comfortable shoes, my old shop that I grew up in. And it was kind of one of those situations of let me go back and show him what I've become now. Like, he saw me in my early days. He saw me leave. He saw me come back. Now he's getting to see who I am now. And when I came back as I still had my 6 ASCs at the time. And at the time I was 38 years old. 37. Okay. About 37, 38 years old. So this would have been 2017.
And how long since you had worked there the last time?
It had been at least 8 years.
Okay.
Other than just stopping in while I was in town and giving them a hand or them making a phone call and I'm helping them out over the phone. I mean, I physically had not worked there full time for many, many years. So I go back into that shop and of course nothing's changed. It's still the same as it was. But now he was getting to see a slightly different mindset. He was getting to see a guy that had been working flat rate now come back into a shop where everybody was salaried. And I still had the flat rate mentality. I still had the hustle. I still had the go. And I still had the work ethic. And now I had 2 kids. I had to support them. I had a wife, 2 kids. I got to do what I got to do. And I busted my butt there for quite a while. But then me and the service manager, we had some conflict. and we just could not work through it. And I ended up leaving and going to another shop. This other shop I was going to, it was a position that I thought I was going to go to as a diagnostic tech, but he was looking to me more or less as just pure labor. He just needed a guy to actually do work. And
Okay.
I felt like that was kind of a step back in my career. Here I was doing diagnostic work and doing electrical and enjoying it. I went to Super Saturday, loved it. So my career was going in one path. He wanted my career to go into another path, and it just didn't work out. And I ended up leaving that shop. And the whole time, this is when COVID flared up.
Okay.
My wife is active duty military, and what not a lot of people know unless they're married to a soldier is when your spouse is active duty military, they don't come home when the kids are sick. They don't stay home when the kids are sick. When daycare started closing early, it wasn't an option for her to get off early. It was me. And being in that position in this industry, it made it tough. It made it really tough. Trying to negotiate that situation out. And that was part of the rift that happened with that second shop. And but it actually was a positive thing that it happened, because my mentor was working at a shop and he put in a good word for me. And the person he put in the good word for me was good old DW that hired me in my early days.
Okay.
So now DW is now working for a new company, a large company in Savannah, and I'm getting to work with him and I'm getting to work with my mentor. So here we are again proving, look at me now. And when I say look at me now, I don't mean that in a boastful way, but I wanted to give thanks to those folks that put the effort into me and say, hey, look, you guys started this spark. Now I want you guys to see the fire it became. So I got to work with my mentor. I got to work with the guy that hired me originally, that laughed in my face for the $40,000 goal in life. And I'm making a lot more than $40,000 a year. So they were so happy to see where I had taken my career since they had last seen me, really. It was nice getting to work with my mentor again, because, it's like being back in the nest again.
Sure.
And it was comfortable, and I went in there and I was just a diag guy. All I did was diagnose cars, check cars out. Basically, every car I checked out, any labor that needed to be done, it went to 3 other technicians. Got split between 3 other guys. And that's all I did. I had my ASE master at that point, which they offered to reimburse me, but I didn't give it to them because I wanted to own that myself. So they sent me to my first ATG classes. Any kind of training I needed, any kind of support I needed, they paid for it. They would take care of it. And I got great training. They were going to pay for me to go to Super Saturday when COVID canceled that. So darn, that didn't work out. Same way with Florida Foundations. Are you familiar with what the ASA Florida Foundations event in Daytona?
I think I've heard of it, but I wouldn't say I'm super familiar with what it is.
It's a good thing. It's a small training event that takes place at the Daytona Motor Speedway. I got to go to it one year. I'm looking forward.
Mario down at that one?
Mario was at that one. Brandon was at that one. Bren Klein is one of the guys that helps organize it.
Gotcha.
Ben Jameson was there. A couple of people were there. Which I do have a funny story about Super Saturday, but we'll go back to that.
Okay.
So I worked for them for almost a year, and my wife got medically retired out of the Army, and it came time to, I won't say decide what we're going to do next, but kind of decide what we're going to do next. And she got a good job offer back here right outside of Fort Hood which Fort Hood is about 45 minutes north of Austin, Texas.
Okay.
I learned in my career that to get the best pay, I need to be in the bigger cities.
Yep.
So I reached out to some of my friends that I still had here, and lo and behold, they contacted me, and Christian Brothers was interested in me again. It wasn't the Christian Brothers I left. It was a different Christian Brothers location. And that's who I work for now. I'm very happy with them. I wish they weren't flat rate because I don't like flat rate, but they have the workflow. They have the efficiency that flat rate works. It works at that location.
Okay.
Would I love to see flat rate go away? Absolutely. But I just actually was in a conversation the other day that basically I'm going to become the diag guy at that shop. And
nice.
That's a good thing. I enjoy doing the programming. I'm enjoying doing the diagnostics. At 40 years old, I don't like to beat my body up anymore. I don't like to swing hammers on ball joints.
Yeah.
Can I do it? Yes. Do I enjoy doing it? Not so much anymore.
Takes a toll on you.
It does. It adds up over time. I look at my mentor. I got to work with him again back in Savannah. He's in his late 50s now, and he still does all their alignments, 90% of their suspension work. And he's a freak of nature. I'm not going to lie. He's a freak of nature, but that's not where I want to go with my career. I've learned that I'm smart up here, and I'm smarter up here than I am right here in my hands. So it's a good thing. And having all the training opportunities, I'm not going to go too in depth with it because I don't want to make this like a Christian Brothers commercial. But they've got some.
But you're happy where you're at.
I'm very happy where I'm at. I'm not going anywhere. I'm seeing the effects of the technician shortage. I know when I got hired on here with them, it was the highest amount I had ever been offered before in my life. I never thought I would make it to this point in my life, but I had a lot of support from great people, and I hope that the younger technicians will look around and see that the support is out there. I mean, I'm jealous of what the younger technicians have. I remember when the best tools you could buy were off the tool truck. I'm jealous that they can order stuff off the internet.
Yeah, right. You do a little price comparison right in your pocket.
Jeez, I'm jealous of the fact that we had to wait for an advanced auto part or some part store class that really wasn't a very good class to begin with.
They're trying to sell you something more than anything.
Yes.
Yep. I've been to plenty of those.
Oh, I took one class that was put on by a part supplier, and I learned that the reason we ever have any issue with this one manufacturer is because we don't use that manufacturer's parts.
Yeah.
To the point where the whole reason with the 6.0 diesel injectors is because we don't use their parts. I'm not going to name any names, but you can read between the lines and figure out who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure people can figure it out. Yeah, I've been to those classes. Those are, I feel like you waste your evening. You want something good out of it if you're going to spend time outside of work to go to training. But yeah, nowadays kids have Scanner Danner and countless other YouTube channels and online options. I mean, I like the in-person training better, but you know, for a kid that doesn't have much money or free time or ability, just to pick up, watch some Paul Danner stuff or Bernie Thompson or somebody on YouTube. I would have killed for that when I was that age, you know?
Well, whenever we were here at Fort Hood and my wife was still active duty, we were coming up to the slow time of year. And I wasn't happy where I was working at. My wife got sent to training in Virginia, and we had our 1-year-old son, our firstborn son. And my wife said, hey, look, time's getting slow. Why don't you, it was about September. My wife said, well, why don't you just come to Virginia for 4 months? we had enough in savings. We had enough in reserves. She was like, just take 4 months off and come out to Virginia. She wanted to spend time with our son. I wanted to spend time with her. And our only question was, well, what are you going to do for 4 months? And I kind of looked at the situation. I said, I'll watch Paul Danner videos. And I literally took a whole Paul Danner class in 4 months. I ordered his ebook. I studied it, and that actually set me on a pathway of, learning how systems work. And I find that to be a very good foundation to me eventually getting my ASE Master Cert. It was a great foundation. The fact that I emailed him a question and he responded, and that kind of goes into my funny Super Saturday story. Was I got there a day early to Super Saturday, and my kids were tired. It was nap time, and I had been speaking with David Wagner through instant message, and I was like, well, why don't I just come there and help y'all set up? So I went to the location and started helping them set up the classrooms. Well, of course, I'm setting up the classrooms, and here comes the Train by Tech guys. Tommy was there. Bren Klein was there. Rich Falco was there. There was quite a few of them. And I immediately turned into little schoolgirl fanboy. These were the guys I watched on the internet, and I could not talk to them. I immediately...
A little starstruck.
Oh, starstruck is a minor statement. And then, I remember the Train by Tech guys, they were setting up, and Chris Groff was over there, and I'm like, I can't even go over there. It was a total Wayne's World moment. I'm not worthy. And
I know the feeling, man, for sure.
And then the next day, I'm walking through the event, and there's Paul Danner. And I'm just like, all I could do was shake his hand and just tell him that I had watched his videos and how much they meant to me. And of course, I'm seeing Mario. I said hey to Mario because I've been watching him on YouTube. I said hey to Cody because I'd ordered the Delta pressure sensors. I'd emailed with him a few times, and I was now getting to meet him. And my second class, I'm sitting next to Ivan from Pine Hollow Diagnostics, and I'm just like, holy cow, that's Ivan.
Yeah.
I remember looking over at his book, and every time he took notes, I was like, I better write that down too. It must be important.
Yeah, it's so cool. All the technology and networks and ways we have to share now that you can be aware of these people, because go back 20, 30 years and you could be in the same class, the same people, and you wouldn't know who any of them were because they didn't have a YouTube or a website or whatever it might be. But you get to connect now with people all over the country that you'd almost never meet or be close friends with otherwise. And now you can just share this connection, right? We're nerds for cars, and we're all friends because of it now, even though we're hundreds of or thousands of miles away from one another. I think that's so cool. It's so cool. It's a good thing about technology.
Well, 10 years ago, I remember if you ran into a problem on a car, you called somebody on your cell phone and you prayed that they had run into the same issue before.
Yeah.
And you were up the creek without a paddle if you went through all your contacts and nobody had a direction for you. And
send it to the dealer.
Yeah, send it to the dealer.
Hopefully you're not the dealer.
Yeah. So I remember those days. And to get to go to like ASA Florida Foundations, I mean, Mario was there. I took Brandon Steckler's pressure waveform acquisition class. And then after class, here I am hanging out with Bren and Brandon just BSing. And I'm like, holy cow, these people eat food. These people actually, like, they have to drink water. I mean, I did not know that. I thought they were. It goes back to the whole Wayne's World. I'm not worthy. And to actually get to hear them talk about, training and teaching, and it kind of gave me a new perspective. And I hate to say this, but it kind of gave me a new outlook on my career choice.
Yeah.
It's really made me start considering looking into training new technicians. It's something I would like to do. It's something I've kind of started practicing by writing a Snap-on oscilloscope course.
Awesome.
Just to see where I could take that. Maybe get an opportunity to teach that at some point. I remember coming up in the industry realizing that guys just basically worked on cars, and then eventually, they got old enough, they didn't work on cars anymore. They maybe worked at cars on their home time, and then later on in life they died. That was the life of a technician. Now I'm seeing this as an industry. There's more to it than just fixing cars. There's so many companies out there like that just help with technical support. Take, for example, Christian Brothers has its own technical support group that if I run into an issue, I can shoot them a request on a forum and they'll contact me back. Teaching, training, seeing guys like PJ, who not only is a master Toyota tech, but now he's getting into teaching. Cody, who's now moderating some of the CTI classes. Wouldn't be surprised to see him start teaching a few. It's interesting. I'm starting to see a longer longevity for the technicians that put in the effort.
They have more options too, more directions that you can take your career than was obvious or present before.
One benefit of being back in my home whenever my wife got stationed back there was I got to go back to my private school that I graduated from towards the bottom of the class and do career day. So I got to talk to high school juniors and seniors, and my area of expertise were the trades. I got information from electricians. I got information from plumbers to kind of show that there is another pathway besides college. There's a great pathway besides college. And the main thing I was talking to them about the automotive industry is the automotive industry is not just the guys that put their hands on cars underneath the hood. There's a whole journalism side to it. There's a technical side to it. There's a teaching side to it. There's so many more avenues that I like to tell people I'm part of the automotive industry. And that doesn't just mean I'm a technician. There's more to it. And I don't even like to consider myself a technician. I like to consider myself as a technician because I do fix cars. But I also like to teach, even just teaching my service writers what I'm talking about. Teaching the younger technicians. I like to consider myself an instructor in that area. And I can tell you, younger technicians, if you can't explain it properly to your service writer, do not expect him to be able to sell it. So take the time to understand the system, so not just that you're better, but that you can also teach others. And that's how you leave your legacy. You with your podcast. Dude, that's another avenue in this industry.
Yeah. Hopefully it's helping somebody. And like you said earlier, if it helps one person, like if it somehow out there changes somebody's career path, even a small percentage, and changes their life, hey, it's all worth it. Right. And same message for anybody. If you got a passion and you got some knowledge to share, you could change one person's life, with probably minimal effort too, right? Just anybody out there, give a helping hand, some encouragement, something, and you change somebody's trajectory by 2%, right? It seems minimal, but extend that out over 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden you're looking at a huge change in where they're headed, right? So do that. I mean, why not? Why not help somebody out in this industry?
Well, one of the biggest things that made me happy in this business was I'd say probably about 5 to 10 years ago, my disappointed parents that I'd got out of the medical side of it. My dad was watching me scope something one day, and he looked at it and he goes, "That looks just like what I would watch on an EKG." And I said, "Well, it's very similar to what you would look at on an EKG." And his comment to me was, he goes, "You're kind of like an emergency room doctor." And I kind of was like, "Well, how do you mean?" He said, "Well, you have something come in with an unknown complaint. You hook up equipment to it to look at the symptoms. You make a diagnosis. You follow that diagnosis path, and you see where it leads you. And it tells you whether you need to do more testing or you found the cure." And he goes, "It now makes sense. What would have made you good as a doctor has now made you good as a technician." And he actually told me that he was proud of the pathway I took. My mom sits back and goes, "Wow, you make more money than I did as a nurse." and my wife says I actually go to more continuing ed than she does. And she's a nurse. So it worked. Wow. It worked out in the long run. They kind of look at it and say, "Well, maybe college wasn't for you." But I did in the long run find my pathway. And the other piece of advice that I give them is cut through the daily BS. That's just noise. It's not part of the process. If you enjoy what you're doing, you will outwork the next person. You will push yourself farther, and you will enjoy doing it daily. If you ever start to get bored, dude, look around. There's other ways to get motivated. Super Saturday was the best thing that ever happened to me. Dude, it lit a fire under me like I had never seen before, like nobody in my personal life had ever seen before. I mean, I came back from Super Saturday and I was just like, it was like a rejuvenation. I mean, it was so great. Mm-hmm. So now I'm planning on Super Saturday this year, Vision, and then Vision in March. Because I figure come off that 6-month high and then catch another one.
Yeah, you just keep chasing that high, right?
Yeah.
Well, I will most likely see you at Vision, for sure. That's on my list of training events to hit within the next 24 months or 12 months or so.
Well, one more thing.
Yes.
One of the reasons I've got to where I've got, and probably where you've got, and where any of these guys that are going to see anybody on YouTube have gotten, is because they never stopped asking why. They never just put that part on because, well, 9 out of 10 times that fixes the problem and we move on. They wanted to know, why does that fix the problem? And then they wanted to dig deeper into that system. And they wanted to understand that system. And I tell you what, the ones that have kicked my butt the worst are the systems I now know like the back of my hand better than anything I've ever known. I had a truck a couple weeks ago with a 4-wheel drive issue. I can tell you more about the GM automatic 4-wheel drive system and how it works than I probably should know. And I could probably write a book on it now. But it was because I got my butt kicked on it. And I just never stopped asking why.
I think I was just talking about Cody with that, is that the struggle that you go through on a particular car or problem or whatever, it sucks when you're going through it. 100%. It is frustrating, especially if you're trying to make money and you got a bunch of other things to do. It is not fun and you're not in a good mood. But when you look back on it after you get through it, now that's a just key, not even piece, but a whole book of information in your head that you get to keep now, right? That's yours, and you know it extremely well because it was beat in your head, but that's how you earn it, right? You got to go through it. You got to struggle. And I try to look at it that way as much as I can right now. If I'm struggling on something, like, okay, this will be worth it eventually, even though it sucks right now, you know, but that's how it is.
Well, and I remember the people in Denver that sent me to my first CTI class. he made the comment, if you learned one thing from the class, it was worth my money. And by the end of it, because I kept asking why, and I had great support around me, that eventually I got to the point where, okay, I'm retaining 50% of this. I understand 50% of what they're talking about. Okay, now I understand 75%. And I slowly started learning that. And the younger technicians, if you're going to training and you pick up one thing, it was worth your time. If you didn't get all the answers you wanted, I'm jealous, because now there's great YouTube channels out there where you can go get that information. And then if you still haven't got the answer you want, Facebook networking.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm jealous of these 20 and 30-year-olds. Like, I wish I had 50% of what they have at their fingertip. And it's amazing to me to see some of these younger guys that don't even realize it's out there. And I'm just like,
right.
You know, get your head out from under the hood. And start going out there and looking around. And, you know, to get to listen to like your podcast and the mobile guys and what you guys go through. I mean, I'm sitting here like dreading that one problem child. And I'm like, man, you guys only get called in on the problem children.
Yeah. It's an interesting gig. That's for sure. All right. So one more question for you.
Go for it.
Before we wrap this up. You took a long and winding journey to get where you're at right now. And I think based on what you were saying, you're pretty satisfied with where you're at. Would you have changed anything looking back on it?
The only thing I would have changed differently was when I was working with those older guys. I wish I would have just learned to be quiet and listen, but I can't totally regret that, because the best lessons I learned was through trial and error. But to just stop and listen, you know, if you're working around guys that don't want to see you get better, you're in the wrong place. And if you're in the wrong place, then you need to make the change. And when you get in a good supportive shop, it will light a fire under you that you will take it to the next level. Don't give up on yourself. You know, I've had days where I've practiced how to say, thank you for calling Papa John's. Can you please hold? But don't give up. Don't give up. Keep up the good fight and keep going, and don't stop asking why. You know, don't stop asking why. Don't stop learning. Gosh, I mean, I could write a book on all the little lessons I've learned. You know, one motto I have in my life is, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, he eats for life. And the reason behind that motto is, if somebody's just going to give you a little bit of money to stagnate your career, it's not worth it. Just keep pushing, and you will get somewhere. So don't give up. Just don't give up. The information's out there. You can find it. And thank you to Facebook, the technician groups, that you can ask the questions and not feel like you're an idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you, Mario. Thank you, Cody. Thank you to all the other guys that have put together the great Facebook groups. Gosh, I mean, thank you, younger guys, for making the road better for some of us older guys. I mean, I hate to say at 40 I'm old, but yeah, I'm now the older guy in the shop.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on here and discuss how I came around.
Oh, for sure. I appreciate you taking the time to share your story. That's important for people to hear. So yeah, thank you very much. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. I want to thank Ben again for coming on the show with me and sharing his story with me and everyone else. I also want to thank you for listening to the show. Really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody's getting some value out of the podcast. But other than that, we're going to wrap it up. So let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.